All right, I'm going to go ahead and start us off. So welcome everyone to this WIOA professional development session. This is a part of our re-entry workshop series that we're hosting this spring through June. And so we are excited to have you joining us for this second workshop this morning. We had the first workshop previously, and thankfully our presenter Jeffrey is going to be sending us a recording of that as well. So if you weren't able to attend in person for workshop number 1, we are going to be pushing that recording out this week, so you can view it on your own time. And then you are here today for workshop number 2, which is fully virtual. Today's session is recorded as well. So if you miss it or if you miss parts of it, or you want to go back to highlight something that Jeffrey said, or you want to send it to a colleague, this session is going to be recorded today as well. We will be doing breakout rooms, but some of you will be staying in the main breakout room. So that way we can have that kind of conversation recorded as well for later viewing. I did want to note that we do have closed captioning on today for accessibility reasons and for note-taking purposes. So feel free to turn that on. If you are somebody who needs closed captioning for accessibility reasons, please chat me privately, and I will make sure that you stay in the main Zoom room because Zoom does have isn't fully accessible in breakout rooms yet with closed captioning. So if you do need closed captioning for accessibility reasons, we want to make sure that we keep you in the main Zoom room here that we're in right now when we go into breakout discussions. That way you still have the closed captioning capabilities, because breakout rooms do not have closed captioning capabilities. The presentation from today and today's recording will be up on our re-entry workshop website, and I can put that link in the chat here momentarily. We do want to invite you today to participate fully. This is an immersive workshop. This is not a webinar like our Workforce Wednesday webinars. This is a fully immersive workshop. We want you to participate fully. So please, we invite you to unmute yourself when you have questions. We will have plenty of time for Q&A. If you don't want to forget your question, you can feel free to type it in the chat as the presenters are presenting the content. But we will have plenty of time for Q&A. So please, we invite you to take notes and turn your cameras on, participate fully, and interact with the presenters for today. We're joined again by Jeffrey Abramowitz, and he is joined with his co-presenter, Andrea Lopez, today. So I'll let them introduce themselves. Really briefly, my name is Kirsten Bayer. I've been talking to you for the last 30 seconds and didn't introduce myself yet. So my name is Kirsten Bayer, and I'm with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support, and we are hosting and supporting this workshop series in collaboration with the WIOA Professional Development Committee as a part of DCEO. And then I'm also joined today by my colleague, Molly Cook. Some of you might know her. And so myself and Molly will be on today's session to provide tech support and just help supporting the presenters today. So if you need anything regarding today's workshop series or have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me via the chat, or you can email me as well. I'll put my email in the chat too. And I think that's all I have for housekeeping. I'm going to hand it off to Jeffrey and Andrea to get us started.
Good morning, Illinois. How is everybody? Thank you for joining us today. And I always wanted to do this. I wanted to, I wish I had a car or something to give away, because I'm trying to find out who's got the coolest backdrop on your Zoom backdrop. But if you can join us today, I hope that you can, come on screen, come on camera, and we're going to set some ground rules as we go forward. But this is the second workshop. This is Untapped Talent. It's the intersection of education and justice, or justice and education. And we're going to be looking at knowledge and skill building inside and outside of our walls in our jails and prisons in Illinois and across our country. So I'm grateful for you being here today, and I'll introduce my partner in crime today, Andrea Lopez, in a second. But if you missed the first one, the catch-up, and it was catch-up, there was a lot of blood thrown around, and it was all about let's starting with why, and really understanding why we're doing this work, what are the trends in the labor market today? Where is the intersection of justice when we talk about getting people back into the workforce? And then what are the action steps that we all could or should be taking moving forward? So it was a great workshop. We're going to definitely be sharing that. It'll be up on a taping of that will be up on the website. So you'll be able to get to see and go back to that with all the resources that are there too. I should preface that too by telling you that everything we talk about today is going to be in the resource package at the very end. So even if you don't catch a workshop, it pays for you to go back and listen to the other ones or go through the slide deck so that you can pick up all the resources at the very at the end of the slide deck and workshops that we do. So today is really the intersection of education and justice. It's a really important intersection. I'll be talking briefly about a project overview, the rules of engagement. Then we're going to dive into what that intersection looks like, and also the building of the career highway and pathway that's going to come from all of that. So we'll get into that in a second. Our rules for engagement, just want to remind you that this is a 6-part series. So the next ones, make sure your friends and colleagues know about it. It is free 95. It doesn't cost you anything. And it's really going to give some invaluable information. If you can, I'd ask that you kind of come on screen if possible. There are some breakout rooms, so we welcome that. But more importantly, if you have a question, throw it in the chat box, unmute yourself. So we know that, get that question out then. I hate waiting till the very end. And then that question's gone. It was up here somewhere. It's gone. So if you can, you think of the question, please ask it when it hits you. And we'll make sure we cover it. We're going to have plenty of room at the end for questions. So you'll have plenty of time to ask additional questions at the end of this. This is the 6 workshop series that we're going to be doing. And again, the next one after this is going to be Get Ready, Get Set, Get Out, which is all about preparing people for coming home and their next steps. Here are some of our rules. Be curious, not judgmental. We're not live, so if you want yourselves on mute, that's fine. You can multitask. Ask the questions when they strike you. The one that's most important is, I think one is that words matter, so that when you're asking questions, if you could just be mindful of the words that you're going to be using, they are truly impactful. And then the last thing is, I always say what happens in Illinois stays in Illinois. And, I want you to be honest and candid. So if there is something that's a little sensitive, we hope that you'll keep it and don't be afraid of asking that question. We're going to keep it among family that are on this call. If you could take a second right now and maybe throw in where you're from, what are you doing, what kind of work you do, and what agency you're with. That could be super helpful as we move along, not only for myself and Andrea, but also for all your colleagues that are on the call today. And we have a whole wide variety of people on, so I think it'll be interesting to see who's jumping in the pool. So take a second and just introduce yourself and put what kind of work you do, where are you from. Awesome. Take a look at that as it's propagated. So for those of you that have been on a workshop with me, hi again. For those of you that don't, my name is Jeff Abramowitz. I am the CEO of the PD Green program, which is a national program that does educational support and through college students and tutoring inside and outside of our correctional facilities across the country. I also do work for the U.S. Department of Education as a subject matter expert in correctional and reentry education, and wear a number of other different hats in the workforce development field. And I'm also formerly incarcerated. I did 5 years in the federal system. I've been home a little over 7 years and have found my passion, which is working with men and women coming home, working with educators and administrators to really understand better how they can do a better job of getting people smarter and back into the workforce. My partner in crime today is Andrea Lopez. Andrea, why don't you introduce yourself?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Andrea. I retired in May of 2021 from my faculty position that I held at Temple University in the Department of Human Resource Management. I taught courses in compensation and business ethics, and now I'm working with various organizations in workforce development, facilitating workshops with Jeff. Happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. Andrea brings a wealth of knowledge and resource from the human resource perspective. So the HR perspective, and you're gonna learn a lot from her today. I'm excited about it. So the intersection of education and justice, and what does education look like in our country right now? And then what does it look like behind the walls of our prisons and jails? And they really are two distinct issues. And there are a lot of different trends and things that are happening. And I want to kind of walk through with the theme for today is understanding this issue of building these bridges. Like in education and justice, the way I look at the whole process, the whole community, as well as workforce development, it's really about how do we get people from one place to another place and do it so that they can succeed, so that they can get a career pathway and they can be successful and come off all of those different resources that they get from the government and really find what they're passionate and happy about. And the best way of doing that is understanding that this is really about building bridges. And we're going to talk about what makes that bridge strong. But there are three key components to these bridges. The first is adult education. Like, we cannot get people smarter and we can't get them into real true career pathway jobs until we think about how we teach them to read better, to do math, how they can understand digital literacy skills and all those other pieces that come into education. So adult education is one of the key cornerstones or foundations of our bridge. The second is understanding career and technical training, because career and technical training is something that for the longest time, our Department of Education and Department of Labor, I wondered whether they knew each other. Like, I wonder whether they even talk to each other. They often worked in silos. And the truth is that when people get smarter, that they're getting that career and technical piece where they can advance in advanced manufacturing jobs and all these other things we're going to be talking about today. And then the last piece of it, I give it a specific call out, is all about digital literacy. Like, how can we help people understand the importance of learning how to use a computer and navigating and downloading and doing all those things that are required by many employers? So we're going to be talking about all those things today. You may remember back in November of 21, the president signed the infrastructure bill into law. And the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is one of the biggest pieces of legislation that's supposed to drive not only our economy, but our labor markets going forward. It's putting $1.2 trillion into the economy and really honing in on the jobs of the future. What are those jobs going to look like? Well, they're going to look like things like building our nation's bridges, repairing the roads, building an infrastructure for broadband access. And all this is going to be done through the development of grant programs and specific industry advisory boards and things that are going to be targeting people into careers of the future. I was astonished the other day. I was talking to someone who was mentioning to me one of the most in-demand career opportunities today is actually surveyors. The surveying marketplace has actually, the surveying field has aged out. And what do we need to be able to build our bridges and to build our roads? We need surveyors. So really targeting and thinking about the jobs that are coming down from the Infrastructure Act are things that I want to focus on throughout today and be mindful of as we have some of these discussions. So what's happened over the world? In the past few years, boy, have we seen a lot. We saw a pandemic. We saw 10.6 million job openings in our country. And to be truthful, it looks like over the next few years through 2028, we're headed to about 85 million job openings in the world. That's astounding. There literally are more jobs, 1.5 jobs more that are available for every available job seeker in the country. And that's, wow, talk about some availability. But the other thing we're seeing is the decline in people going to colleges and going that post-secondary route. We saw it fall by almost 500,000 people in the last year. And that number seems to continue to be trending down as career and technical training programs seem to be picking up and people are understanding what's really going on. So there's a great article by MZ Burning Glass, and it's a great study, and it talked about the great Sandsdemic. which is without people. And what it looked at was what really is happening in our country. And what we're seeing is, number one, this mass exodus of baby boomers. And that increased over 1 million people retired during the pandemic. We saw increasingly low birth rates in our country. We also saw more and more women left the workforce. 2.4 million women left the workforce. And into things like the service industry and retail industry and travel and tourism, these were all places where we saw a huge hit in our labor market. And also now, as things rebuild, the demand's coming back. Tragically, we've also seen the opioid epidemic that's taken off. I've traveled all around the country, and I keep thinking, I live in Philadelphia, and I've been out in Chicago recently. I've been in St. Louis recently within the last week. And I keep wanting to go to a city and just see a city where opioids haven't just wreaked havoc. And it's just not true. Everywhere I go, from Austin to Albuquerque to Dallas to New York, every city that I go in, opioids are having this dramatic impact on our labor markets and on our communities. I put a statistic in here: 90 Americans die every day from overdose. Those are the ones we can identify and that are directly attributable. There's so much happening in this field. And then the other thing that's also in play here is we're seeing more and more people that are not getting married or having smaller families, which is also an interesting dynamic. But when we talk about education in the correctional institution, you want to talk havoc. During the pandemic, it's been unbelievable, because what we saw were all these programs that were placed on hold. We had all these men and women that were now living in kind of petri dishes in these small little communities and pockets of jails and prisons in our country. And they stopped everything. They stopped everything, number one, because they needed to control the spread of COVID. And even our officers and correctional officers were being placed in harm's way in dealing with the inmates that were incarcerated. We saw education really took a backseat. We saw programs stopped. We saw technology programs and career technical training programs come to a complete hold. We saw education classes that went paper, if anything. We saw technology became a necessity, where people really needed to be thinking about, how do we get education behind the walls and doing it in a way that's safe. And technology started to take a foothold. And then we saw this forced education innovation. We saw places begin to consider, how can we do things differently? What is it that we need to do to start educating people? And it's interesting, but the data shows that inside of our prisons and jails, if we have educational classes that, besides some other things we'll talk about involving recidivism, what really happens is it changes the culture inside, and there are less fights. There's less violence inside. Men are more occupied. They're driven to come home. They're driven because they have this accomplishment that they've been able to achieve behind the walls. We talked about the infrastructure bill, but what you may not know is inside of the infrastructure bill was this unbelievable act called the Digital Equity Act. And that Digital Equity Act is putting $2.7 billion of digital skills training funding and also access. Those two parts of the law, but it's the only part of the infrastructure bill that went in totally unscathed. It went in completely whole, and it provides two things: one, digital access, and the other is digital education, teaching computer skills and literacy skills. What's super interesting about the bill is, if you read it, is there's a specific call out for justice. There's a specific call out to do a better job inside of our prisons and jails in our country. And we're going to be seeing new programming and funding for programming inside and outside of the walls going forward. So education behind the walls, what's it look like? Well, crazily, 64% of those people behind the walls are academically eligible for post-secondary. That means they have gotten or achieved some high school credential or something that can get them into post-secondary. 58% of those men and women behind the walls, they don't complete a single program inside in education, not a single class. 9% of post-secondary programs are usually the max that are completed, but I've read a statistic as low as 1% of those people that actually are going to qualify for programs will earn an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, and 5 to 6% will get that credential. And yet, the overwhelming majority of men and women inside our prisons and jails, 70% plus, they want education. They want to be smarter. They want to learn. We're just not meeting that demand or that need. And there are many factors for that. I mean, staffing is one of them. Actually getting enough teachers inside and getting those professionals inside that can educate and do it well. But there are a lot of other factors that are in play as well, including, a shortage of correctional officers in our country. Just to give you an idea. Craig, thank you. All of these stats are posted in our resources, so I'll be able to share all of them with you. They're from a number of studies that have come out from the Bureau of Justice Assistance and others, and the links are all attached in the end page. I mean, if I get to some of them while we talk, I'll be able to bring them up for you. When I was incarcerated, I was in a system where I taught 60 classes while I was away. And tragically, the reason for that is they just had correctional officers that were there that were not trained in education, that had no desire to educate anyone. All they wanted to do is make sure people were safe and maybe had a safe environment. And that was okay because we had some real talent inside the walls that was doing some of the teaching and instruction. I remember, and I mentioned in an earlier workshop, that I actually taught a CDL class while I was away, and I had never been in a tractor trailer in my life. I taught it because I knew people, they had problems reading and doing some of the math. So I taught them how to pass the test. And Santos, who stood next to me, drove a truck for 25 years. He told them everything they needed to know about actually driving the truck. And it was a good marriage. And a lot of people learned and came home more prepared. Low-skilled adults crossing our bridge that we're building are 2 times more likely to be unemployed, 3 times more likely to be in poverty, 4 times more likely to be in poor health, but 8 times more likely to be incarcerated. 8 times more likely. We have some of these stats for Illinois, and I'll be glad to share some of them with you. Most of these come from national studies, but they do break down. I know the prison, the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and also the Vera Institute have some studies that are out that do break them down by state, and you'll get to see some of them. And I shared some of those links too at the last workshops, but I definitely will. And when we take our first break, when we go into our breakout groups, I'll bring some of those studies. I'll put them in the chat box for you so you have them. So here's what's crazy is if you take one class, just one class inside the prison walls or jail walls, you're at a 43% better chance of not going back to jail or prison. 43%. So we're just not getting the message. This is a photograph from SCI Green in Pennsylvania that I was at last week, 2 weeks ago. And people were there, were engaging. They were in HVAC training programs and other programs. We have to do a better job of bringing these things inside of our classrooms, both behind the walls and outside. So here we go. And now we're going to get into our first breakout. So what education or skills are most sought by employers when they consider hiring and retaining justice impacted employees? Really looking at where the gaps are. And when I talk about education and skills, like what are our employers, what are your stakeholders, what are the people that you work with looking for when we have men and women that are coming home or inside? What are those people looking for when they come home? Because if we don't do that, well, then, we really are failing because we're preparing people for things they may not need when they get out. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into some breakout rooms. So Kirsten and Molly, if you can break us all into rooms, we're going to take about 10 minutes. And one person's going to need to report back, but we're going to come up with a list of those things from an education or skill standpoint that people that you work with, your partners, the people that you're working with, what are they looking for when we talk about hiring or retaining justice impacted talent? So Kirsten, go ahead and break us up and we'll be back and kind of regroup in a few minutes.
Okay, sounds good. So I am going to keep a couple of you in the main room, like we said at the beginning. If you do need to stay in the main room for closed captioning purposes, please let me know and I will make sure that you do. And I'm just kind of getting them situated really quickly. So you should be prompted now to join your breakout room. And then some of you, if you're not prompted to join a breakout room, that means that you're staying in the main room.
Hi, everybody. So I'm here with you, but I'm not supposed to be answering the questions because the knowledge lies within each of you. So if you don't mind putting on your camera so it's easier to have a conversation, we need somebody to offer to take notes and report out when we get back into the main group. And I'll restate the question. I think the question is, what do you think employers are looking for? What types of skills and educational competencies are employers looking for? And the employers that you work with, and basically we're trying to identify what are they looking for and where do you see gaps? That there might be some instances where the employers are looking for skills that you feel confident that your clients already have. But let's start with that. Who wants to be the person to take notes and report out? Oh, please. I was a professor, but I'm not going to call on somebody. Someone's gotta volunteer.
I see Amanda writing. I will start talking, but I'm not a note taker.
Amanda, how do you feel about that?
She's.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear
Okay.
you. Are you okay taking notes and reporting out?
I guess, yeah.
All right. How about this? If we are in the same group again, then we'll strong arm virtually someone else to do it. So you can do it the first time.
Okay.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Tom, you want to start?
Yeah, so I am a business service representative for a local workforce, McHenry County workforce. And regardless of whether they are justice impacted or not, employers in general are looking for people that want to learn. And I know that's not necessarily a skill, but this is what they're looking for: someone who wants to learn and somebody that cares and is going to be invested in their future and the future of the company. Companies are willing to train anyone who has that willingness to learn. So I think, and for those individuals that I work with that are justice impacted, I prefer to come to the employer with someone that's demonstrated that they have already engaged in learning, that they've had, whether it was when they were in or when they get out and working through the workforce, a WIOA program, that they're taking some classes that demonstrate I am a lifelong learner. And whether it applies to the job or not, this employer will see, okay, if you can learn tooling classes, courses, then we can train you. So I would say that, from my experience, and again, it's not necessarily skills, but it's an attitude.
So it's a willingness to learn in the way that you find that employees demonstrate that is by having taken classes.
Yes. That's the best way, is to show, you can go in there, the job seeker, the candidate, go in and say, yeah, I'm willing to learn, I like to learn, but I haven't done anything for 6 months. But if you go in there and say, okay, I've been taking a course at the community college or an online course or anything, and then with an interview portfolio, have the certificates if you get those to show here, this is what I just
Right.
obtained.
All right. That makes a lot of sense. Amanda, what about you?
Well, I wrote down a couple of things. So I did put that. So some of the companies that we work for are, I just got a brain fog. Hold on. So I would say, some training related skills. So like if we was shipping and receiving, then to know, how to drive forklift, to know how to do inventory and, to locate stock and things like that, the locations, the different merchandise and the equipment that you have in the warehouse. And then I will also say basic computer skills as well, because when you're using those RF scanners and things like that, that you need to be able to go into the system, navigate through that. And then professionalism, know how to carry yourself, know how to talk to other people, know how to work with a team.
And how do the job seekers that you work with, how have they been able to demonstrate those skills that they have them?
So we our job seekers, they do take the job readiness course that prepares them for that. So as far as getting their resumes up to par, mock interview skills, the do's and don't when they are doing the application, the job interview, the type of attitude they should have, how they should dress. So they learn all those things in the job readiness class.
Okay, and what about the warehouse skills?
So they do, they have training in the warehouse. They learn the inventory system. They learn, they receive their forklift for certifications. It's 5 different forklifts that they're certified on. They learn how to go and pick product, go on the system and find a location. So that's when the computer skills come in, because it's computers. So they'll be able to go onto the system, find a location and go and pull that merchandise.
Okay. All right.
So a lot of the jobs that we work with, sometimes they ask for the curriculum because they want to know what our job seekers are learning in the training.
Right.
So we provide them with that to let them know that they have these basic skills, and then they're still willing to train as well if they need the additional training.
Well, I think the key there is that there's communication between the different moving parts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is huge. All right, great. Rhonda?
Good morning. Yeah, I think computer skills, I work for, the state of Illinois with the Department of Employment Security. So our local workforce group does more of the stuff with training as far as the individual skills with the people. So, but I mean, computer skills to me, when I'm in the Department of Correction facilities, that is one of the things that I hope that they are learning, because a lot of employers, well, just to even function daily, they need computer skills. But I like Amanda just said, teamwork and the ability to communicate, those are more important things that they need to be, that employers are looking for as well.
All right. And so, and again, there has to be a way for the job seeker to demonstrate that they have those skills, right? And they've practiced them.
Absolutely. Yeah. So like Amanda said, we do resume assistance and mock interviewing here as well at our office.
All right. That all makes sense. Ariane?
I think the technical skills, the computer skills, being able to operate more than just a cell phone, and the customer service piece, whether that's external customers, internal customers, or your coworkers, being able to work with those people.
Right. So my question from an HR perspective, do you guys have strong relationships with certain employers?
Yes, we do.
All right. And do those, and Tom said that the employers who he works with are willing to train, which I get. What about basic literacy and math skills? Are the employers that you work with, are they willing to do that as well?
I'm not sure, but I know that we do teach basic. We have the computer classes, and we have math in a reading class that the participants they receive weekly. So to teach them how to do all those things, a cover letter, references, just to create a like a paragraph, the grammar and everything that comes along with that.
And so, and do you see that there are that the way that the job seekers are being prepared and trained, do you see it translating into meaningful employment? Like, are you finding success?
I would say yes, because like I'll just say, for an example, the math teaches them how to do, the calculations and freight rates. So this is something that they do need when they're working in a warehouse. They need to be able to calculate, not just necessarily always using a calculator, but just use that mental math to, get the calculations when it comes to the things that they're doing, when it comes to sending out packages, and being able to know how to multiply the weight and divide it by whatever the case may be. So
Right.
I think it's definitely beneficial, and it helps them when they go into the workforce.
Rhonda, what about you?
Yeah, I really don't have anything to add on top of that. I think we've made progress as far as teaching some of the skills that were just mentioned that translate into employment, but I honestly feel like we still have a long way to go.
Okay, right. So that's what I'm curious about. So when you say we have a long way to go, on which side? On preparing the candidates, or on breaking down the barriers with the employers?
Both. I think the employers, just because they're so desperate for help at this point, it's so hard to find people to work. I think they're more willing, and they have, broken down the barriers as far as not willing to hire returning citizens. I think they are certainly willing to do that at this point. And I can't say that I've ran across a lot of those issues even in the past, but preparing the individual for work, I think we need, there's more steps that need to be taken. Some of these people have never had a legitimate job. And when it comes to teamwork and communication, things like that, I think there's a long way to go. And just like you said, the basic skills of math, literacy, I do workshops. I have done workshops in the past in Department of Correction facilities as far as career workshops. And for them to write out anything on paper as far as a resume and stuff, it is a struggle. So the education piece is so important.
Okay, so that's where the gaps are then. It's the basic literacy skills, and also operating in that environment.
Yes.
Tom, what about you?
Yeah, I think that's a good, the point about operating in an environment that they're not used to being in. I think of an individual that got sent over working in a warehouse, and he was so anxious when he walked in there. It was all just too foreign for him. He wasn't prepared for being in that environment, and he left and went next door and sat for 2 hours just trying to figure out, what do I do? It's just overwhelming sometimes. And like Amanda, I agree that there is a certain level of basic skills, the math and communication, verbal and written, that they just have to have. As far as the employer side, I see, the employer that will hire anyone, no matter what the background is, but if they hire anyone, it's not going to be a good fit. And and likewise, when we work with the job seeker and they come out and they say, well, I'll take any job, that's a mistake also, because if you're going to take any job, the companies don't take any individual, and the ones that do take anybody, they usually will fail in that because it's not a fit. So we
Or
do
they're
need
not-
we need to educate our employers that, yeah, you're going to have to work with this person, but start out and make sure that it's a fit.
Right. Because if they'll take anyone, they're more interested in the body than the investment in the employee. Well, what about if you guys are working with pretty much the same set of employers, what is what I'm hearing? Do they hire in cohorts? Because it seems to me that it's helpful if the employees have each other, and if the employer is going to provide support services or access to support services, then it would make sense that it's done as a cohort, right? Do any of the employers that you work with do that?
None of the employers that I work with do that, because they're looking at more individuals, more time that's going to be required of them, to train. And unfortunately, they may be willing to train, but they have to be careful about how much time this is going to take.
Yeah, this is Rhonda. None of the employers around in the Metro East area do that either.
Well, with our employers, it's pretty much they'll contact us and let us know that they're looking for it, how many individuals, and we just send the ones to them that we think are best fit for that company. Because some of them are strict about backgrounds, so it all depends. It's case by case. So depending on what the individual's background is, then we'll know who to send where.
Well, we're back. I think we got everybody joining us. Andrew, I don't know about your group, but my group was lively, and we had everybody on, from an employer to people that are on the ground, boots on the ground that are doing this work, and Kelsey and some others that are in their career, in the American Job Center Career One Stops that are doing their stuff. Crazy good discussions about things, but just if we could just take a minute or two, I'm curious, anybody want to just jump in? Hey, Mark, how you doing? Anybody want to just jump in the pool for a second and tell us, like, anything strike you in that discussion? Was what was the education or skill that people were looking for when we talk about justice? Somebody jump in. It's on mute.
Well, in our group, we pretty much said that that those basic literacy skills or basic computer skills, because a lot of these companies, you have to, like with us, shipping and receiving is one, and you have to be able to use RF scanners or to get on the computer to print like sales orders and things like that. So you need to have those basic computer skills. And then also, even when you're writing out a purchase order, you have to be able to write this down, make sure your grammar is right, your punctuation is right, so that people can understand what's being written. And also, even if you have to do it in the computer. We also talked about just having the ability to communicate, to work as a team. That's another skill that they're looking for. Being able to operate in an environment operate in an environment that they're not used to being in. So they're returning citizens, they're coming back out into the world. They're not used to a lot of things that's happening now in the way that things are being done. We also talked about having those job readiness skills, being able to create a resume, being able to go to a job interview and pretty much sell themselves.
Awesome. Thanks, Amanda. Anybody else want to jump in the pool quickly? Anybody? Marcus, looks like you're itching to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, just jumping in with what Amanda was saying. I think we talked a lot about some of the soft skills necessary, kind of communication, time management, timeliness. And I was reflecting on kind of some of the other elements that, that are just kind of foundational, like having some housing stability or kind of wellness, resources, whether it's being in recovery or, mental health supports. And those are less skills, but I think it's also like knowing how to access those skills and communicate if those are elements that, you are in need of, and how to communicate those with, whether it be support systems, support services, or with supervisors.
Yeah, so Marcos, you use the line, and I don't correct people. I just tell them that that's not a word that I use when we talk about soft skills. I don't know where that name came from. Like, who invented the term soft skills? So in my world, in the justice space, there is nothing soft about these skills. These are essential life skills that we all have, and they're really hard. You know, when you talk about people that are coming home from jail and prison, those skills that we often just assume are on the outside are something that we take for granted. Inside, they're really different. And, you know, it means, because there's different culture inside. You know, inside, I was explaining to somebody when I came home for the longest time, somebody inside of prison and jail, when someone walks in this like zone that's around you, it's like sacred territory. Like, you just don't walk in somebody's zone because your antenna's up. You know, bad things often happen when people walk in your zone. And when you come home and you're on that bus, people are in your zone 24/7. When you're in the public, they're all over you. And even at work, understanding those skills and how to deal with it and make that adjustment are often things that we don't give enough thought about, but they're essential skills for a lot of people coming home. And I'm glad you did raise it, because those are really important things. I have one more minute. If somebody else wanted to chime in real quick about something that struck them in their discussion. Anybody?
Well, we focused on pretty much a lot of the similar topics, the essential skills, the gaps in employment history. You know, one of the things too was brought up, you know, talked about, you know, that was brought up in here too, is the communication, just working with the individuals so that they can communicate about their background, to not hide it, to be able to bring it out and be able to have that elevator speech prepared as to what their background was. Talked about, you know, a lot of issues with transportation. You know, if you don't have consistent transportation, you can't be there on time every day. You know, these are things that are realities that we spoke about, and a lot of the great programs that are out there, you know, the fidelity bonding and the work opportunity tax credits. We've seen a lot more employers be more open because of need, most likely, but that's kind of where our discussion focused around.
So it's crazy, because a lot of the discussion surrounds barriers to people coming home, and not so much, you know, attainment of a degree or a college degree, or, you know, although there was a basic adult education literacy component that I think all employers like need, and digital literacy. Andrea, I want to kind of move to you for a little bit, because, you know, what are we seeing the trends in HR, and you know, how important are those degrees and those real credentials when people are coming home?
Right. So it's really interesting, because we're in a moment now, because employers are in need of people. And so they're much more open. And we talked about in our group too, that there aren't as many barriers as there might have been in the past. But yet I think that everyone is still kind of operating in their lanes. And I think that this is an opportunity for since some of the traditional criteria for hiring people is being relaxed, I think it's an opportunity for there to be more creative problem solving. But before we get to that, let's talk about what's going on in HR, and then you'll see where I'm going. So HR policies often are constraining, but they can actually, in this environment, represent opportunities for organizations that are operating on the supply side of labor, which is most of you if you're not an employer. So I'm going to highlight a few of these initiatives in an effort to provide you with some ideas for how you can collaborate with your employer partners as you work to expand the training and educational opportunities for your clients. So in talent acquisition, this is what Jeff is referring to, we're seeing a growing emphasis on skills, competencies, and related experience as hiring criteria, rather than relying on traditional educational credentials. Pennsylvania and Maryland have both eliminated the 4-year degree requirement for the majority of state jobs. And even though this isn't happening in Illinois, companies are also leading this effort. Dell initiated a program to focus on talent with associate degrees, apprenticeships, and certificate programs. Bank of America expanded its talent pool even further by hiring 10,000 employees from low and moderate income neighborhoods, with the goal to hire an additional 10,000 by 2025. Bank of America is also a second chance employer. So the recognition that skills are a reliable indicator of employability represents an opportunity for people with justice backgrounds. The example of Greystone Bakery never gets old. As many of you know, they follow an open hiring model. So here's the process. Job candidates at the bakery complete a one-page form that asks for a name, phone number, and email address. Then they're asked about their physical abilities, like if they can lift a 50-pound bag of flour or sugar. Once the form is completed, it goes on a pile that's arranged in chronological order. And the next time a job opening becomes available, the person that's at the top of the list gets a call. There's no background check or reference requirement. And the first day of orientation is the employee's first day on the job with full benefits. So the opportunity with open hiring is that companies can start with small steps. They don't have to do it for all of their positions. It could be one job. It could be one job in the stock room or one job in the mail room. And companies can expand from there if they decide to. Opening hiring speeds up the hiring process, which in and of itself is a positive. And that's what gets that. So that's what gets that initial training. And the idea is that you don't need the academic credentials there in an open hiring situation. Other HR opportunities include integrating mentoring relationships into orientation and onboarding. So we know from, in HR and workforce development, research shows that mentoring can improve employee retention rates and boost employee satisfaction for all employees, regardless of your background, regardless of what level you're at, whoever you are. And mentoring programs provide the opportunity for new hires to establish trusting relationships with more experienced employees who wouldn't be their supervisor or coworker. So that relationship becomes a safe space to ask questions and discuss issues without fear or shame. It's within these relationships that employees can develop their knowledge of the less obvious aspects of the company culture and also develop those skills that we were talking about, the psychosocial skills, resolving conflict, accepting criticism, asking for help. These relationships benefit the mentor as well as the mentee. So, and the idea is that in our group, we were talking about this, that a lot of employees, there is open hiring to different degrees now that employers are in need of bodies. But what happens is that an employee with a justice background is hired and is in a completely new environment. And they don't always know they don't always feel comfortable operating in that new environment. And I asked if it would help if employees were hired in cohorts. And even if it would seem that might be something that you can talk to your employer partners about, but even if they're not willing to hire in cohorts, having those mentoring relationships might actually help address some of these issues that you guys were talking about. And also an open hiring process might actually fit some of your employer partners in certain positions in their organizations. So that's what's going on there with the shifting of criteria for employability.
So Andrew, you talk about this. This is great information, but the truth is it's not a program. We think of programs like, we're going to do this program and get people that are justice involved back to work. And it's not a program, it's a model from the HR end. We should be looking at what's the model employer and how are they doing it? And look at those employers that are really doing it well and how they go about the process. But you need to ask the question as an employer, and you also have to raise some of these options and alternatives like mentoring and that kind of thing. I did a project with waste management on a national level not long ago, and they were really receptive, but they needed to ask the questions, like what do we do? How do we work through challenges like a parole officer and all the things that may not have transportation the first week, and maybe we should advance them their first week check. And maybe we should make sure they have work boots and give them a uniform the first week so they know how to get here and they're dressed appropriately and all that stuff. And it was interesting too, Craig mentioned in our discussion about some things that were needed. And one thing he mentioned was this basic education piece because of safety reasons, like being able to train them so that they can read the safety signs and the protocol books and all the things that you have. Really interesting. We're going to dive a little bit further into this, but I do want to spend some time today on like understanding the target. So we know we need to build this pathway. We need to build this highway where people can get from one point behind the walls to this success on the outside. And I want just everyone to take a stop and think for this a second. Like what we saw in the pandemic was not so much people retiring, although a lot of them did and that kind of thing, and people leaving their jobs, and a lot of them did. But if you go to the core of what really happened, people were doing things for 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years in their job. And they finally said, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. This is not where my heart is. I don't want to do it anymore. And that's the opportunity that we need to give people that are coming home from prisons and jails is what is it that you love to do? I do a project for the U.S. Department of Education on the IET and corrections. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But I went to a facility where they were doing this credential, and I asked the women, it was a women's facility, how many of you are going to do this when you leave these walls? And not a single hand went up, not a single hand. And it wasn't that they weren't getting a decent credential. It was good, it was fine. But if it's not in what they really want to do, then are we really focusing on the right thing, or are we wasting our time? So teaching on the bridge and getting people smarter means doing things a little bit differently. And that means thinking about blended learning programs where, you know, it's not only virtual, but it's live and virtual. It's a hybrid where they can learn with a person one-on-one. I'm so proud to be CEO of the company that I'm in because we are actually bringing college students inside of prisons and jails around the country to actually work one-on-one. And we're doing more than educating. We're actually changing culture. We're changing these young people's minds about the people that are behind the walls and understanding there's a humanity there. We're developing better platforms and better technology and content inside the walls. We're contextualizing learning better. I'm a very visual person. I like to see it. When I see it, I can understand it better. And doing things like bringing virtual reality to the table, where we don't need to bring heavy construction equipment inside of our prisons and jails. We could do it with virtual reality, where we can give them some experience and see what it's like to work on a job site, and especially in advanced manufacturing settings and others. And then also, we're beginning to understand better digital literacy and how important it is by giving tablets and computers and laptops inside to help men and women not only learn, but to get ready for what's going to happen when they get out. Some of you may be aware or not aware of an IET, Integrated Education Training. So it's a project I'm working with the U.S. Department of Education. It's been out for a while. It's this unbelievable model. So here's what it is. A math teacher is teaching fractions in or near a teacher who's teaching carpentry. It's contextualized. And now you're going to throw on top of that some career preparedness piece. And this is already provided for in our WIOA laws. Every state has is guided by an IET protocol. Check it out. The United States Department of Education recently published a whole toolkit on how to launch an IET. They're funded through WIOA, unbelievable place, but they do require adult education and literacy activities, some math and reading, some workforce training, that construction piece, some preparedness pieces. And if you go to the U.S. Department of Education's, the LINCS website, it's lincs.ed.gov, and it's part of the materials. Check out the toolkits that are there, and there's some great graphics. So the one for correctional and reentry education, I was part of crafting it and just was published last Friday. So if you have something you're going to check out and you're working in this space, check out the LINCS resource collection and the toolkits that are there. Just will be invaluable. There's also in WIOA our individual training accounts, which is essentially where we're helping support people to find that credential and get smarter. So when I came home from prison, I was working in Philadelphia at an adult education place and a Title II company, and the men and women I was with, they just wanted to get back to work and find that job and get some training. So we sent them down to our career one stop, American Job Center, and they just floundered. They couldn't get into an ITA. They couldn't succeed. So I went down and I met with the director down there, and I said, why don't we do this? Let's have an upskilling class. let's get them smarter. And let's get them so that their grade level is at a point where they can enter into an individual training account to be a welder, to be a phlebotomist, to be a pharmacist, whatever it is, whether it's justice involved or not. And we don't do enough to think about those basic education skills that are going to get people into these train programs. 2 of the programs resulted in contracts. One was with LabCorp, that's the phlebotomy needles, and LabCorp, they needed phlebotomists. But they also had 3,000 warehousing and logistics jobs that were open. So how you integrate those jobs into the work that you do and really getting people skilled and trained. And then the other one was with CBS, also doing similar kind of work. So really important to look at the tools that are there. I do think that we fail as educational system when we talk about post-secondary, because for men and women that are justice involved, the bridge collapses inside of our prisons and jails and as they come home. We really should be connecting people to educational resources behind the walls when they come back, but thinking that people are college ready or college prepared when they walk out the door of a prison because they got their HSC or because they got their high school diploma, I think is just wrong and is setting everybody up for that's in the system for a huge shock when they get it and they actually try to get back into the college world and post-secondary. So we've been hearing about the Pell window opening for justice, and there are over 460,000 people that are going to be Pell eligible come July. I don't believe that Pell eligibility is Willy Wonka's golden ticket for all of us. I don't think it's our golden ticket for a lot of reasons, but the big thing is because I don't think we're doing enough preparing people to actually be successful when it comes to going post-secondary and going into a career pathway. The Pell Grant and the government's made some great changes recently. If you're not familiar, so I remember this when I was a kid. It was a long time ago. The FAFSA Simplification Act. How many people on the call have struggled with filling out or helping their child fill out a FAFSA form? It's like you need a college degree just to do that. And it's interesting, but they now made it really simple for people that are justice impacted. Number one, they allow a paper submission, which is awesome. They waived a selective service waiver. So you don't need it to be in selective service or registered. They have a fresh start program for people that have defaulted on prior loans. They also have reduced the requirements of providing proof of an HSC or GED, and certainly a waiver of income requirement, which makes a lot of sense. Like, I'm not sure I know a lot of people who could inside of prison and jail that are making enough to surpass the income requirement, making 9 cents an hour. And then they also provide ID assistance for people that are trying to work through the post-secondary. So we're at a point now where, okay, we know we need to get people smarter, and we know the essential skills are out there in those pieces. But what can you and your partners do to help get people smarter behind the walls and as they come home? What role do you play on this call? What role, if you're an employer or you're in the workforce development field, what role should you be playing to actually to make the system better, to change all of the dynamics and the culture for people coming home? So we're going to go back into our rooms for a few minutes, and we're going to have a discussion about what can you and your partners be doing to get people smarter behind the walls and as they come home. You guys laid out a lot of great things and topics that were barriers, but how do we get over them? What should you be thinking about? And then we're going to dive deep into them. So I'm going to ask our facilitators, Kirsten, if you can, throw us all into some rooms, and let's get going.
Do we want to be with the same people?
Sure, why not? We're all friends.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Right.
Hello. I think they put me in a different room. Is this room 1?
I don't know. You might
This
be
said
stuck.
join room 1, and then but I'm here.
You might be stuck with us.
Okay.
So Amanda took notes last time. Do I have a volunteer to take notes this time? Rhonda, are you volunteering?
Yes, you did hear that.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, so I guess the question is, what are we doing now? And I guess our group answered that a little bit. Like, what are we doing now to better prepare the job seekers, and what can we be doing better? You guys have any thoughts about what we can be doing, what you can be doing differently with the partners that you have?
Andrea, one thing that I'm actually working on, there's a grant that was given to New York University, but they are working it in the southern part of Illinois with 6 specific correctional facilities. And they're doing an educational piece with the grant, but my part in this grant is to go in, and it's essentially like doing case management before the individuals are released, because a lot of times I think they don't know specifically where to go for the needs they have. So we're having them do an assessment in regards to employment. And then based on that assessment, we're like, here's the resources, the address, the contact name, the phone number. Here's everything you need to follow up on that need that you identified.
So it's prior to release.
It is.
So I have a question. So that makes total sense, right? But then when you think about it, I kind of, the analogy that I have is like when you go to the doctor. You go to the doctor and there's a health issue, and you discuss it with the doctor, and it all makes a ton of sense when you're there, and then you leave and you forget everything, even if it's written down. And you kind of need either a refresher, you need someone to go with you to remind you, or to ask some of the questions that you're too overwhelmed to ask, right? So I'm wondering, so if this is done prior to release, which makes a ton of sense, is there a follow-up afterwards?
There's a follow-up being done by an organization that is part of the grant. So they're doing the post-release case management, basically. So they are following up with the individual to make sure that, you know, they've reached out, they've got, you know, what else, other needs do they potentially have that's going to prohibit them from finding gainful employment. So yes, there is a post-release going on.
And is the program been in place long enough for you to see its impact?
I have not been part of the program long enough personally to see. The grant came into play during COVID, so it was really limited, unfortunately, what could be done during the, you know, first couple of years of it, to be honest. So this year it's in full swing. It's set to expire at the end of this year, so I'm not sure. I mean, we've had people that have gotten like welding certificates. They have found gainful employment. They are doing well. So yes, I mean, I think there are success stories to tell, but overall, I'm not sure what the numbers are.
Okay, all right. But it's, I mean, on its face, it makes complete sense. Is anybody else aware of or partnering with any organizations that are doing things that are working in terms of training and education?
Hey, Andrea, this is Ugo with Central States theyre. We've had some success with the on-the-job training program, OJT, that Department of Labor has, where we subsidize an individual's wages for a period not to exceed 6 months for a company's willingness to hire and train them on the job. So the individual is hired on as an employee from day one, but through an agreement with the job site, we put them into this training program on the job training, where the individual receives support, direction, and training from an immediate supervisor, performs their day-to-day work with an emphasis on direction and support, and it's monitored during that period of time. And then we reimburse the employer back for the individual's wages, a percentage of the wages for that duration of time. And we've been able to leverage this program, one, to have employers employ individuals they may not have employed before, because we're pretty much able to say to the companies, if you're willing to hire this person and train them on the job, we're willing to reimburse you a portion of the wages back at you. So that's a nice program there for that aspect. But we've also been able to leverage that program to increase individuals' wages, where the way we calculate the reimbursement is based off the a percentage of the wage times the duration of time. And so we say to these employers, if your thought is to maybe offer them a raise in 3 to 6 months from now, give them that pay now, because that's what we'll use to calculate your reimbursement. The higher the rate, the higher the percentage. And what we've been able to do is actually take some companies that may have not been background friendly before, and because the program allows us to do a 75% reimbursement on individuals with prior criminal involvement, as compared to a general 50% for all employers across the board. And so they get a much higher percentage rate than somebody that isn't. And so we've been able to kind of convince employers to be more willing to take individuals on. And because they've been able to see the progress, that they themselves have just changed their HR policy to be more inclusive.
And while the employees are getting the OJT, are there also kind of wraparound support services for some of the other areas that some of you guys were saying people need help with?
Yes, so they do receive wraparound services. So they get transportation assistance, bus cards, gas cards. We provide financial support for any kind of work clothing, boots that they might need. While the program's taking place, we do on-site monitoring to make sure that the individuals doing the work they should be doing and they're getting the support they should be receiving. And then we also act as a sort of labor liaison, where if some sort of issue or conflict does arise, we try to mediate between the individual and the employer to make sure that we're able to move forward on that. And we've been able to do that successfully as well. And then just providing the additional support that might come up. So if there's any additional fees that they might incur because of employment, like maybe paying for a licensing or certification because of the job, we can cover those as well.
Well, that sounds really successful. And how long has the program been in place?
The program itself has existed for longer than I've been around. It's from Department of Labor, but we've had a lot of success implementing it for the past 8 years.
And over those 8 years, have you been able to add more employers who are willing to participate?
Yes. Yeah. So we're constantly always looking for new employers that are willing to participate in the program. And then we have some long employers that have been with us for a long period of time.
Well, yeah. I mean, that sounds like it's hitting all the points, right?
Yeah, it's been a very successful program because the incentive and reimbursement, the risk on the employer. The other part is we reimburse the employer for their efforts. So even if there has to be a separation because the individual decides to leave or they're forced to separate from the individual, we still reimburse them. So those create a nice safety net for the employer to do that. But of course, the individual is receiving all the supportive services on our end as a participant while they're working.
Right. So you mitigate the risk for the employer.
Mm-hmm.
And it lasts what, 6 months?
Maximum of 6 months.
And do most of the trainees either transition to full employment or are they able to find employment elsewhere?
Generally, they transition to full employment. Our goal is that they're actually considered employees from day one. So they're employee from day one. Their payroll is whatever the company's is. They do their time as any other employee. They get benefits like any other employee. So it's actually stipulated that they have to be treated like any other employee as they're going through the program. Just that there's an additional consideration of training and support for the individual. But we've had very high success rate. Generally, those that go into the program are hired already from day one, and so when the program ends, they continue working. So it doesn't cause any kind of oh, now you're an employer, now we have to interview. Right. Scenario like, no, you've already interviewed them, you already like them, we came to this agreement, you're moving forward with them.
Right. So I don't want to crowd this. I want other people to be able to answer. I just have one more question. I can't help it. From an HR perspective, do you see that the employers that participate in this, it sounds like they pretty much have open hiring, right? Are there any other HR practices that you see that they do that help make this a successful program? Because it's not just a matter of getting reimbursed. There has to be some sort of an approach from the employer that's supporting this.
No, definitely. So one of the biggest factors is when we have our conversations with these companies, is we let them know that individuals are willing and able. It's just, life gets in the way, right? And so you have a great employee, but the issue that happens more times than none is that there's some situation at home gets carried over into the work, and that affects their attendance, their ability to perform the work, and then those are usually the things that lead to termination. And so we let the employers know, because we do these kind of programs, we're supporting this individual on the back end. So we provide them with
We lost him. All right. Well, he'll come back to us, I think. Does anybody, in the meantime, does anyone else have anything else to share that of a program that's working well in terms of enhancing education and training for returning citizens? How about some ideas about what a program that you currently have that could be working better? Anybody want to share anything? Hugo, you're back.
Sorry, my connection went out for a quick second, and I was like, "Whoa, what happened?" I left my call. So I'm not sure where I left off, but I was mentioning we do provide a lot of supportive services on the back end, which makes them better employees, and we let the employers know about that. But the other, once we get our foot in the door, we let the employer know that as they are just moving forward with their intake process and identifying new candidates, that they can refer them back over to us so that we can support the candidates on the back end. And so they may have somebody that's coming in for employment and they're interacting with them like normal, but now because they know about our service and our programming, they actually refer them over to, hey, Hugo, we have somebody here that we're looking to bring on board, but we really feel like they can take advantage of your supportive services, or they might need some assistance with housing or assistance on applying for childcare, so they can, take care of that back end stuff that you talked to us about, so they can be good employees on the front end.
You see, this illustrates what I really think that all of the, we're trying to get people with justice backgrounds, we're trying to get them employed, and we're trying to get them into meaningful jobs that are so that they can achieve financial security. And there are certainly a lot of barriers, and we've talked about that, but I really think that the solutions are already in the room. It's just a matter of identifying the right programs and creating the partnerships and building on it. And maybe sort of, in the situation that you just explained, Hugo, that's based on a Department of Labor grant or program that can't be created out of thin air. But some of the components of that, of course, the employer reimbursement is huge, but there's WOTC too. I think that to a large extent, a lot of the components are there. It's just that everybody is so busy doing the job that they're hired to do, that making those connections and creating those partnerships is an extra step that is elusive, but that could exist, right?
No, definitely. One thing I would say, you brought up WOTC, right? That's definitely a good resource there. But I found that the reason that we've had a lot of success with this particular program is that we've taken ownership, and we do a lot of the paperwork for the employer. So we take care of their eligibility. Are you eligible to participate in this program? So there's some eligibility criteria. Then we put together the agreement. Then we create a training plan for the employer based on the job requirements, and then our we do an on-site visit before we move forward, just to get a sense of what the work environment is going to be like, who the supervisor is going to be like, what the responsibilities and expectations of the job are. We take that information and create a training plan, and then with their review, then we go ahead and implement that training plan once we identify the candidate. And so we take care of all that for the employer, and we pretty much say, all you have to do is hire this person and make sure that you train them on the job. And here's the guidelines to help you in that training process, what you should be focusing on, how long it should take you to train them in this particular area. You move forward with that. We'll take care of the monitoring and the documentation recording that's required for the program by the state and the Department of Labor. And then we'll process your reimbursement at the end. You just make sure to hire them, you train them, and then we take care of the rest for you. Because I can tell you, I've talked to employers in regards to some of these tax credits and WOTC and vet and things like that, and they all think they're great. Employers think like, oh, this is a great opportunity, great. I like to be able to take advantage of it. But when these programs tell the employer, you need to fill out this paperwork, you need to do these things, and HR looks at themselves as, this is just an extra piece, this is just extra work for me, forget it.
Wow. So Hugo, we're ear hustling on you, buddy.
Yeah.
We're ear hustling.
I agree. I say it's, the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Yes.
There you go. Yeah. I so agree. So if any of those that are just joining, Hugo was give us his insight regarding the reality that, there may be these incentives that are out there to kind of help employers get in the game and to get to the table, but are they really incentives? Let's be truthful about it. When I talk to employers and we talk about the federal bonding issue, quite frankly, it's not the first $5,000 of any lawsuit that they care about. It's everything that happens after that. It's the millions of dollar lawsuit that's coming out of all that they're really worried about. I don't think that even the WOTC credit, and there's some state credits in Illinois that are available. I don't think we do enough incentivizing employers and giving them the capacity to really do that. If we did, what we would be doing is saying to companies, you know what, we're going to give you a credit for sending your participants or your employees back to training programs to get that stackable credential. Or we're going to give you a credit if you pay them transportation for the first month that they're working, or give you a clothing discount for them, or we're going to let you advance them their pay and no tax rate or whatever. There's 1,000 things we could do in this space. I want to talk, and I'm going totally off script, but this is really important. And I want to talk to you about something that came up in our discussion besides the incentive piece, which is really the fact that it's this village piece. So you guys missed it if you weren't on the workshop number 1. We talked about it taking a village, right, to make all this happen. And yet we live in this country filled with all these silos. They're like siloed everywhere. And understanding that this is all about really coalition building. It's about building partners and building the people that we can work with that's going to make a strong ecosystem for getting people back to work. And there are a lot of organizations that are out there. During the course of this workshop, you're going to be getting a bunch of those resources and those networks. I just caution you that even those networks are only good if the information is current and if it's accurate. Otherwise, it's just ultra frustrating. So we're moving ahead, and I wanted to share a little bit of some things that I think can change culture when we talk about education and making this stronger bridge behind the walls and in our jails, and things like allowing more good time credits for people when they get credentialed or when they get their high school or college degrees inside, providing resources and supplies, building tutoring as part of your model inside of the walls, and making prison while punitive, not punitive as much as educational, preparing people for what they're doing coming home, supporting them and getting them ready for when they walk out, before they walk out the door, possibly getting a post-secondary and education tutor, coordinator, to kind of help coordinate where they need to go to, how do they navigate, who do they need to talk to, and then ban the box for education. We haven't talked ban the box yet, but ban the box is a law which I'm not a big fan of. I think it does different things, and it often has a reverse consequence than what we think. But ban the box for education, where educators are not asking the question, where have you been? but what do you want to learn and how can we get you there? Again, making that inside out connection, providing pre-release benefits, increasing teacher pay, providing more professional development, and also employing a pay to learn model upon reentry, where people are actually getting paid to learn and to keep them surviving with their families. Look, when people, men and women, come home, they need diapers, they need baby formula, they need things to keep their families going forward. And a paid to being able to get paid while they learn is something that is often one of the largest barriers for people coming back. We have a lot of people on the call today that are in the workforce system, and one of the things that I know is one of the weak parts of our bridge is that connector. I can't understand, although we're starting in Pennsylvania now, why any state in our country doesn't register someone at a career link before they come home. I know there's address issues and there's all these different reasons why people claim it's not happening, but we should be connecting people before they even walk out the door. When you get out, this is where you're going. Kind of meet me at the gate, and this is where you're going to go to next. Making that connector bridge strong is one of the secret sauces of all this. And the second secret sauce is something that Andrew is going to talk to us about, which is really the partnerships and looking at things like apprenticeships. And Andrew, you want to give us a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Do you have access to the PowerPoint?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, let me reshare. Gotcha.
So we spent a little bit of time talking about in terms of, like Jeff said, setting up with CareerLink, that some of those, someone in our group Rhonda was talking about a program that she's aware of where prior to release, people are getting information about what the next steps are. Because we're all aware of and this is really important, and to provide that information as often as possible. We're all aware of the importance of adult social bonds and reducing recidivism, and not surprisingly, family support is associated with higher rates of employment, reductions in substance abuse, success with assistance, and fewer physical, emotional, and mental problems. Companies can provide support in these areas through some strategic partnerships. But while employers can give their employees access to existing programs that they have, like employee assistance programs or wellness offerings, they might not be aware of the local and state resources that are also available to them. And this is another area where you can provide useful information. And again, we're in that funny situation where there are opportunities, there are fewer barriers, there's more of an openness of employers. But you guys and the employers are so busy doing their jobs that these opportunities for connection and to create and to provide to help employers see that there are resources that are available to them that could help, and to make this whole process easier, it's almost like that's a job that doesn't exist. And it's really hard because everyone is already overwhelmed with their own job. But if we can sort of create some of those connections, I think that because the answers to a lot of our problems are already in this room. It's just a matter of sharing that information and creating those opportunities. So Greystone, for example, works with a local nonprofit. It's the Westchester Jewish Community Services, who meet new employees during orientation the first day. So whether it's housing, child support, dealing with social services, transportation, mental health, Greystone wants all of their employees to know that if they or their families need help, they can get help and the company cares. So those opportunities to partner with local social services agencies are things that you might know that the employer doesn't know how to access. Other partnership opportunities are more job focused. Not surprisingly, the sectors with the highest number of job openings are education and health services, professional and business services, trade and leisure, and hospitality. The Manufacturing Institute is the workforce development and education partner of the National Association of Manufacturers. And they created a partnership to help manufacturers recruit from the reentry population. A recent study by Deloitte and the Manufacturing Institute says that the skills gap could result in over 2 million unfilled jobs by 2030. And as you're well aware, many formerly incarcerated workers were trained in manufacturing related skills while they were inside. And this is the same for inside experience in food service and preparation. So apprenticeship programs provide an on-ramp for many of these jobs, but not only in the trades. The National Restaurant Association Educational Foundation partners with HOPES, which is Hospitality Opportunities for People Reentering Society. And they also loop in community-based organizations to offer employment to justice-involved applicants. And they ensure that participants have identification, housing, other key items that they need to rejoin their communities. This is taking place in Illinois. And some of the community-based organizations in Illinois that's working with these organizations is Lawrence Hall and Safer Foundation. So they're working with HOPES and also with the National Restaurant Association Education Foundation partners to create these opportunities that includes more training and follow-up support services. And participating restaurants in the Chicago, Illinois area include Manny's, Mod Pizza, and Savor Chicago. And there's a contact there if you're interested to learn more. Jessica Blumquist is part of the Illinois Restaurants organization that facilitates this. Growing Home is a nonprofit in Chicago. They provide farm-based training for people with employment barriers. Participants receive 25 hours per week of paid on-the-job experience, job readiness programs at the farm, plus support to manage various issues that people might need, including access to legal help for expungement, childcare, literacy, opportunities to earn professional certifications. And their link is over there also. And then there are the transitional employment opportunities. Now, as Jeff will passionately argue, it's not just employment, but it's the quality of employment that contributes to desistance. So the ultimate goal is a career, a job that provides a living wage, a job that someone loves, the opportunity for skill development, growth, strong relationships. But the reality is that employment, at least at first, is likely to be intermittent for a variety of reasons. So the role of transitional employment opportunities have a unique place, given that the expectation is that they provide some tangible value, like the opportunity to gain skills and behaviors that higher quality jobs require, even if that work is part-time or temporary. So since this option of transitional employment won't achieve sustainable financial security, the relationships with those employers and the expectations of your clients should be realistic, but they also serve a purpose. So in Philly, the example that we work with is Baker Industries. And you might have a counterpart in Illinois. Baker Industries offers a unique nonprofit workforce development program. They provide jobs and training for over 200 vulnerable, hard-to-employ adults each year. They partner with other organizations to provide outsourced labor and packaging, assembly, shrink wrapping, and mailing. And they make a concerted effort then to place their employees in full-time growth potential positions within 9 to 12 months. So those are some examples of, and when we think of apprenticeship, we think of the trades, but that's not so. There are apprenticeship programs in all sorts of different industries. And I think that the idea is to try and figure out ways of partnering with employers and also with local organizations to see what opportunities there are and how you can create. And again, there's a lot of the solutions are there. It's accessing them and making it easier for employers to access them.
Thanks, Andrea. I can't talk enough about digital literacy and digital equity, but 82% of all middle skill jobs are going to require digital proficiency. So we really need to think about what we can be doing to get people smarter when it comes to accessing computers. Our bridge is it's got to include the people at the table that are our adult literacy agencies, our career one-stops, our community colleges. There are a few on the call today. looking at things like apprenticeship employers that are willing to open the door up, as well as unions and workforce development boards. And I'm grateful to see a number of employers on the call today, because it does take a culture to stand up and say, this is how we're going to open the door up, and ask the right questions of, what does this mean for our company, and how can we see this labor pool continue to grow for us and keep us sustainable. The stakeholders in the village that are working on this bridge, again, our career one-stops, reentry programs, occupational training partners, community partners, and education partners that are all there kind of making the case on this is what we need to do in order to get people in the workforce. But more importantly, honestly, is these silos need to be broken down and opened up so we can all take advantage of the great work that's being done on the ground. There are some resources that are available that I think you should check out. One is the Coalition on Adult Basic Education, COABE. It's coabe.org. Has some tremendous resources for you. And now they're doing a lot in the getting education tied to workforce and getting people into skilled trained programs. But it's a great free resource that does advocacy work in Washington on helping get funding and other resources to adult learners in our country. It represents, COABE represents thousands and thousands of adult educators and over 5 million students that are trying to get back on their feet and get smarter. The other one I mentioned earlier was Links, and it's lincs.ed.gov. It's a great website that it's free. It's run by the U.S. Department of Education. And if you go on there, there are communities of practice for career pathways, for reading, math, DE&I. I oversee and moderate the one for correctional and reentry education, which has a bunch of tons of resources on there that are all totally free, and encourage you to kind of jump on and take a look at some great resources there. I talked a little bit about the PD degree program that I'm at. I'm not going to, people that are familiar, but you might want to check us out. It's PDGreen, PETEYGREENE.org. And again, it's doing tutoring across the US. And there's Andrea and my emails, and we'll be able to share those if you have any questions. There are some things, and we're going to open up for questions in a second because I want to give plenty of time for this, but I promised you resources, and boy, are you going to get a lot of them. So in the slide deck that's going to be shared with you are all of the resources we talked about, all of the studies that you could use, including the SHRM Getting Talent Back to Work link, which is a great resource tool if you're anyone who wants to learn more. It's a 10-course module, 10-module course, which is really easy, but definitely will give you some insight on how to hire and retain people that are justice impacted. And I know a few have asked, Craig, you asked for some of the data that I used, and it's all here, laying the groundwork. Accessing continuing education is one of the resources that are used. There's a bunch of them here. I told you that there's plenty of them, some that just came out as well. So you'll get all these links. The Council for State Governments, if you're not familiar, has tons of studies on the issue, including the collateral consequences of coming home from incarceration. Really, really great stuff. Great place to get some useful data. So one of the things and packages of this project, or parts of this project, is office hours. So many of you have questions, I know. We're not going to solve them all here in this hour and a half, 2-hour discussion, but every Thursday from 8 to 9 o'clock, there'll be office hours for you to jump in and ask what questions that you have. Generally, I've been doing this across the country, and you'll get after this session, you'll get a copy of the Zoom link. Sometimes people will want to get into a breakout room to talk about something confidential. More often than not, it turns into a really robust discussion of common issues that people are having. And it's a good way to start your day off by just checking in and saying, I got some questions and I need a resource here, or I need to connect to somebody and where to go. So it'll be starting this coming Thursday from 8 to 9. And we'll make sure everybody on this webinar and anybody that's attended the prior ones also has the link so they can jump on if they have any questions going forward. I want to make this your time for a little bit and ask any questions that you might have of things that we talked about. Remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Going forward, we're going to be talking about interviewing and best practices, HR practices in the employment world, and how should we be addressing this issue at all different levels. So there's a lot more to come. Each series is going to be a little bit more engaging as we go forward. I believe some of the next ones are going to be actually doing some mock interviewing, and where we all get in and play the role of somebody that's just come home and what that's like. So I want to open the door and give you about 15-20 minutes for any questions or thoughts or discussions that you might want to have. A bunch of great points were raised today, so I'll be quiet. Anybody want to kick us off? I can't believe after all that, no one's got a question. I either did a super good job or people are just shy. That no one wants to be the first one in the pool. So I'm curious. So we had this discussion, so I'm going to call him out because he was in my group. But Craig, you work for an employer, and you just started to get in. Any surprises? Anything as you open this door that you say, "Wow, no idea, didn't see that one coming"?
How readily people who were formerly incarcerated shared with their coworkers about their background, and excited about the fact that, my understanding, they did that within their first week or so of employment. They've been here almost a month now, and I haven't heard of a single issue.
Wow. So one of the things that concerns a lot of employers is the issue of probation and parole and people being under restriction. And I'm wondering, have you faced any of those issues where probation and parole said you can't do this job, or they've come to you and needed documentation or other things regarding people that have come home?
Not yet.
So I'm curious too, of those people that are on, just you can put a thumbs up or whatever, but how many of you, if you were going for a job interview, how many of you would actually bring up a criminal past that you have? Would anybody? It's not, they don't ask, they haven't asked it. Everybody, you look pretty good. Mark, you look pretty honest guy. I'm not going to ask the question. How many of you would voluntarily bring that question up? Anybody? We have any brave souls here?
Hello.
Yeah.
My name is Moises Bernal. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, I think you can see me too, but I can't see myself. There we go.
We see you.
All right. Well, okay. So I work here at Central State theyre. I'm an adult programs manager. I am Hugo Avila's colleague here, and I speak from experience that my experience. So I had a background. I probably still do, but I got most of my stuff expunged and sealed after sending so many customers to go get their records expunged and sealed. I said, well, I probably should do it for myself as well. So that was very good. But I want to go back to I'm very happy with my job now. But I would like to go back and just apply for some of the jobs that I didn't get during the period where my background started becoming a problem. Because I'll tell you this much: I had pretty much all my background was in, college days, sit-ins, direct actions. It was stuff that was activist like, but it was there, and some altercations got somewhat heated, and so there's where the big ones came in. But I was a teacher for my first part of my professional career. I was doing many other things. A call center worker at AT&T, and my background never it was there, but didn't cause any problems. You know, I was teaching, I was working. And then as I got older, then all of a sudden, you know, even though it was many years ago, it was causing me problems. And so, yeah, I mean, to advise customers on what they should do, I go back to my experience, and sometimes it was damned if you do it, damned if you don't. So one time I would raise it, I would put it in the application, you know, I'd be very, very truthful. Oh no, then it would be a problem and I wouldn't get the job. Then the very next one, I said, okay, well, that didn't work. So maybe I won't mention it, you know, let me not, unless it comes up or whatever. So, and then that was a problem there, because why didn't you, you know,
Right.
oh, it popped up and why didn't you say this and blah, blah. So, you know, now the position that I'm in now, I would basically tell people, listen, be truthful, right? Because end of the day, I don't know, employers, employers have their databases, employers have their resources, and especially any kind of government employer, government employers, you know, as I know, having expunged and sealed my stuff, I know they still have access to, you know, they know that I sealed and I expunged, and I think they still have access to some of the records. So yeah, just using my personal experience, I tell people now, let them know. But your question is, do you bring it up? That's a kind of, you know, I would say if they bring it up on their applications and in their interviews, well, you should be truthful. But I don't know about volunteering it. You know, I don't know if I tell my customers to volunteer it, just because that's a good practice.
So wouldn't it be better if, like, in Illinois has banned the box, but wouldn't it be better if we were just upfront with people right away and just said, look, we don't hire people with a criminal background for X, Y, or Z, so they know going in, and it not coming up is kind of the worst thing that can ever happen, because we really are setting them up to possibly and often start the job. And they get in and they get through the first week and they're working, and then all of a sudden they get the phone call. Oh yeah, we got your background check back, and sorry, we gotta let you go. There's nothing more deflating, demoralizing than getting that phone call when you thought you were doing the right things, getting on the right track. And I think we're probably often better if we don't set people up that way and just have this open, frank discussion and dialogue about hearing their story and the journey that they've been on. Kelsey?
Yeah, Jeffrey, can I say something real quick about
Sure.
that? Because it reminds me of another experience that I had. So I applied for a security guard job, and they allowed me to do the first 20 hours. It was about 1 or 2 weeks, probably 1 week, 1 week of the course. And I had this instance twice, but the one that really hurt and really was, just like you said, demoralizing. And I walked home. It was pretty far. It was a far walk. It was from downtown Chicago to north side Chicago. I was so deflated. I was so, upset. I was like, they let me do 20 hours of this training. They were about to hire me. And then on the Friday after the training, oh, guess what? This thing pops up. We're not going to be able to hire you. I was so upset because, by this time it was the third, fourth time something had happened. But these people allowed me to have the illusion or whatever that I was going to get hired. And the other time it happened, it was, oh, you know what? The other time it happened, I had paid more than $200 to become a taxi cab driver in Chicago. I did the 2-week class, or maybe 3-week class. I passed everything with flying colors. I paid my money. And then at the end of the day, guess what? This thing popped up. You say you didn't have nothing. And I can't be a cab driver in Chicago for the rest of my life. Even though I sealed it and expunged it, and those things are so demoralizing, just like you said.
Absolutely. Kelsey, did you want to add?
I'm just agreeing that it would be nice if it was laid out in a job description beforehand, because I've had many individuals who have gone through later on, once the background check and everything else came through, they no longer had that job. So I do encourage my individuals to always disclose anything that they have that might possibly come up. We would rather them say, no, I'm not going to hire you, than for you to get ready and get everything that you need and all the paperwork done and be ready and excited to have a job, and then to be told, sorry, no. So that is something that I do with my individuals as well, as we go through before they go to that interview, or before, when they're in that job search. What are you going to tell them? And a lot of times we write a letter so that they have it and they don't get flustered when they're in the interview. And they can leave it with the employer too when they leave. So they either can bring it up and say, hey, here's my background. Or if maybe they're not comfortable with that, at the end, they can say, I do have this for you to consider before you are offering me the position. So I've definitely seen the frustration that you're talking about there, where you think you have a job, you're even working it for a while, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, sorry, our background checks came back. You can't work this job. So it's frustrating for sure.
So I got another solution for you too. I'm sorry, got it.
I was going to say, as an employer, you've got to be careful with that, because, I would never put it on a job description, because our job description for, let's say, material handler. So the law is quite clear, right? That you can't go back greater than 7 years. And if somebody's been incarcerated for 15 years, right, are you discriminating against them? Right. So what does the background return? So I would be very careful about putting it on a job description, because the law is quite clear, and the EEOC has been quite clear, that you have to take each circumstance based on its face, right? If, as Jeff said, and Jeff can probably talk about this even more being a lawyer, but if he was applying for a financial job, it is very relevant. If he's applying for a material handler job at our facility, his background and the charges and why he was incarcerated is completely irrelevant, right? So it's a very slippery slope, and I think there's some things that employers need to do. I also think there's things that individuals have to do. I don't know if the CLAB licensing, do they disclose that if you have these backgrounds, it bars you from getting certification, right? There are some things, such as being a teacher, right, where you cannot have any type of youth pedophile criminal charges or things of that nature, right? Those are certainly understandable, but those are certification and state required things. I think it's a slippery slope if an employer starts putting some of those things on their hiring requirements, or start inquiring because it's supposed to be on a case-by-case situation.
So I don't want to go too deep into this, because that's sessions 4, 5, and 6 are really diving into these issues legally from an HR end, and Andrew and I are going to share our insights on all of that. But I do want you to think about this, is that how about from the employee end? If an employee files a job application with you and isn't straightforward and is dishonest, there's a few things that will happen. One is he probably won't get the job, right? Because he lied on the application. 2 is, it may get out there and, he could get fired if he gets hired. But the other piece of it is, if he did it online, he's actually committed wire fraud. And although I don't think our government agencies are going after everyone that lies through the internet, because I don't think there's enough manpower in the universe to tackle that job. The truth is that people that are just as involved they need to be mindful that if they send stuff through the internet that's not 100% truthful, that it could get them in a lot of hot water on the wire fraud statutes. And we're going to talk about a lot about that stuff going forward. I have to say it's been a pleasure being with everybody today. We just have a minute or two left, but I wanted to thank you all for being here and let you know again that we're going to be sharing a lot of all these resources and everything we have on the website, as well as with office hours. So feel free to reach out to either Andrea or myself. Andrea, thank you. It's great partnering with you. And as we get into this, you're going to hear more and more from the HR perspective of where we're diving. So, if one request I have for all of you is please share this with people. These are free resources. This is a free workshop. Share it with the people you want at the table so we can continue these discussions over the next few months. And looking forward to doing the next ones that are coming up. With that, Andrew, you want to give us some parting words?
Are you kidding? I'm a professor. I know not to talk in the last 5 minutes of a class. Thank you. I can see everyone's packing up their backpacks. Thank you so much for sharing your morning with us. We look forward to seeing you next time.
You got it. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. And just a note, you'll be receiving a survey via email for this. So make sure you complete that. And thank you so much for joining us. I put a link in the chat box to the link where you can find out more information about future sessions.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. It's good.